Okay, well that to me came across as a contest on the highlights certainly that could have gone either way. Callum, Lossiemouth with a good spell to start with, but then both teams had their moments, and ultimately what makes the difference is a good header from Ben Johnston, although Lossiemouth probably would have wanted to be a bit tighter.
I think it had, as it went on, it had that feeling that the first goal was always going to be crucial, and as much as I thought Lossie competed well throughout and they were never out of the game, as Frank McGettrick touched on afterwards, they are lacking something in the final third. The few openings on Saturday, even like there's times when they flashed in 3 or 4 good balls into the box and you're just looking for somebody to be there or looking for somebody to take a chance or for the ball to drop to someone, and it didn't happen. And then I always thought Rothes, although, and I would agree with Ross Jack, they certainly weren't at their best. They, with Greg Morrison up top, I always felt they had just that wee bit of something potentially, if a chance. I mean, he was unlucky not to score in the first half. Cammy Farker made a really good save, but I thought he just gave them that wee bit more spark in the last third. And admittedly, the goals come for a set piece, and Liam McDade puts it in a really good area, and Ben Johnson's a sort of towering presence gets up well. But as you sort of said, Ryan, Lossie clearly be disappointed to lose a goal in that manner, which has ultimately cost him getting something out of the game.
I think Frank McGettrick touched on it in his post-match interview. He got his new signing, is it Henry Jordan?
Henry Jordan came on in the second half. He's a sort of forward player. He'd played as a trialist against Banks when they got a draw. He's signed from the RAF Lossiemouth team, so they'll hope he can provide that extra bit of spark that they're looking for in the final third. I thought when he came on, his touch and that was decent. His link-up play was quite decent. So there's clearly something for the Coasters to work with there.
The other talking point from the game, of course, was Rothes had to draft in a last-minute replacement goalkeeper, which seemed like it was a bit of a task for Ross Jack, but he found one that was a familiar face for fans of the Highland League.
Certainly was. Kevin Main, obviously, been on the go in the Highland League circles for 20 plus years with Lossie, Buckie twice, Turriff, where he obviously knew Ross Jack from, and for Martin as well. And as Ross touched on in his interview, his usual goalkeepers were all missing, so he was scrambling about a bit, I think, on Thursday and Friday, but he managed to convince Kevin to pull on the gloves once again. And as you saw in the highlights, it was largely like he'd never been away, really. There wasn't much alarm, really. Kept a clean sheet, so all good for him. Might see him back. He was adamant that it was a one-time only thing on Saturday, but I wouldn't be surprised if he made the odd appearance here and there going forward, but we'll see.
Okay, again, based on the highlights, my take from that one would be it was a deserved and statement win for Banks of D. Buckie Thistle's first defeat of the campaign, and the first goal from D, from Mark Gilmore. What a run, what a finish.
Oh, it's top drawer. And I mean, the result, first of all, is one that I think Banks of D were needing. They'd had a couple of disappointing results at home, so that they've really come back strongly by ending Buckie's unbeaten start to the season in the league. But yeah, I mean, the goal is fantastic. Cuts in, and I think everyone thinking he's maybe going to cross it, and he's like, no, I'm off, and it's a tremendous finish.
I think it was probably Banks of D back to their best, I would say. I mean, I thought actually, D probably had the better than, but I didn't think it was a game of like loads of great chances. Buckie had a couple sort of round about the box. I think Jack McIver had one in the first half, especially. It just after they lost a goal, it just went wide and things like that. But you couldn't really say either side was guilty of passing up loads of really good openings. But I thought Banks of D, like that, we know that's on their day. That's what they're capable of. Solid throughout, and took a really good goal. And I mean, Magnus Watson would obviously preferred to. He scored the penalty, but didn't really make a difference when they were able to score for the corner directly after that. And I think that's maybe one element that'll frustrate Buckie and Graham Stewart a wee bit, in that Stuart Knight's made a really good double save to keep out the penalty, and then Mark Gilmore's follow-up. And with that, and at 1-0, you sort of think you get a bit of a lift for that. Could it be a turning point? But to then concede a goal for Marks Alexander for the corner straight after, well, undoes sort of Stuart Knight's good work and leaves him with an uphill task really after that.
I think the bigger disappointment for Graham Stewart will be 2 Saturdays in a row his side's failed to score. I'd be struggling to think of last time that's happened.
The last, and from what I've seen of both games, there's a little bit of a lack of edge in the final third, isn't there?
I suppose you could say that, but I'm always of it in mind that you'd probably, with the forward players Buckie have, you always sort of expect something to turn up, expect them to create something, and they have over the 2 games, because we saw last week as well. They have created chances, they just haven't been converted. So it's a bit of a blip for them, but I think it shows you how competitive the league is this season already. That there's nobody with a 100% record, and the only 2 sides that haven't lost are Banks and Breedon. So it just and they're playing a week on Wednesday, so cannot potentially could be down to 1. It just shows you how competitive the league is, I would say.
2 red cards in the game. The first one for Andy McCaskill, I think it's safe to say we don't know.
Well, we don't know what he said, but it's clear it's obviously...
He must have said something.
Clearly, it's clear it's obviously dissent, which is maybe a sign of Buckie frustration, perhaps, that he said up, because it's not something you would usually associate with Andy necessarily, and I think at that situation in the game, he's one of their main creative threats. It's just a bit needless, really, getting himself sent off at that time, and then obviously you incur a suspension as a result. But
he was maybe asking the referee to get out the way because he was trying to take his free kick.
I thought, given there's a foul just taking place, obviously, because it's a free kick, whether he'd maybe said, like, you're not booking him, which I think they're clamping down on, or something like that. So, I mean, that's pure speculation.
Whatever it was, I think Mr. McCaskill didn't have much complaint because he just turned and went, okay, it's a fair cop, governor, in a way.
The second one,
well, on about frustration boiling over, I think that was, with Andy, I think this bit the same with the second one, the sort of challenge and the pile in, and like Mark Young, the video doesn't do him any favours, and I'm sure Mark won't mind me saying this, but he was he'd been in touch with me asking me how it looked on
Not
on
great.
Sunday,
It's the short answer.
It's bad, Mark.
And it's like I don't think there's not a great deal of force, but as soon as you get that sort of 2 players sort of go head to head, when there's lean in, referees are always very quick to clamp down on that, and Mark's an experienced player, he knows he maybe shouldn't have.
Put it this way, we're not expecting an appeal going.
It's one of those though, isn't it, as you say, Callum, where it's like, if both players run in at exactly the same time, and they both lean at the same time, and it's like, it's generally fine, they've just squared up to each other. But the problem is the timing's slightly off, it can't be.
Yes.
But okay.
It is what it is.
That's that game, big result there. Let's talk about, first of all, the other teams we perceive to be title challengers this season, although they're piling up nowadays. Wick Academy 0, Fraserburgh 3, Ryan Sargent with an early goal, Logan Watt and Paul Young then had made it 3-0 by half time. Gordon McNabb skied a pen over the bar for Wick, who had Alan Hughes sent off late on. But I suppose the way things are going at the moment for both Wick and Fraserburgh, that early goal makes all the difference, doesn't it?
It did make a big difference. I mean, Gary Manson was frustrated. I mean, he was saying afterwards it came for a Ryan Cowie corner, and he said it's like a corner in a really dangerous area whipped in, but his frustration was when the ball eventually breaks, Ryan Sargent standing in the 6-yard box for free, basically, to put into the net. Just doesn't feel his players are reacting quick enough and defending well enough, and they lose the second and third, and the thing is, it tightened up second half, kept a clean sheet in the second half, competed better, but by that stage the horse is bolted really, and it's probably a sign how things are going a wee bit at the moment. Gordon McNabb wins the penalty, then puts it over, and just before half time at 3-1, that gives you a wee bit of a lifeline and would change the complexion slightly. I mean, if you look at Fraserburgh on the other side of it, 7 wins from 8 in all competitions this season. 1 loss was to Buckie. They're ticking along quite nicely, and Mark Cowie, I think one criticism he maybe has had this season is losing the odd sloppy goal here and there, so clean sheet on Saturday was very welcome for them also.
Clark 0, Formartine United 5. That result of the weekend, combined with Buckie losing at Banks of Dee, as we've discussed, means that United are now out in front at the top of the table. Graham Rodger with a couple of goals, as did Julian Wade. He scored a double as well. Adam Emsley with the other. Formartine goal. Formartine will be desperate to cling on to that top spot for an extended period, won't they? I know nobody looks at the table at this point in the season, but you know, once you're up there, you want to stay up there if you've got title aspirations.
If you're top, you're looking. I think, for Martin are the dark horses for me this season, and they've quietly gone about their business. I mean, they had a tough start at Brecon first day of the season, but they're looking good, scoring goals, keeping clean sheets. They are the team to catch at this early stage, but it is really nip and tuck, which is refreshing to see.
I mean, you're touching on their 10 goals in their last 2 games, none conceded. You can't really argue with that. You look at it, the other side of things from a Clach point of view, their last 6 games in all competitions, they've conceded 32 goals, which just
you can't
happen. I mean, Jordan McDonald said afterwards that it's got to the point where they're just gifting games away with the mistakes they're making, and that some of the things, he also used the words absolutely ridiculous for some of the things that have gone on. And I mean, it's just, I think as well, it's sort of a bit of a cycle in terms of it's happening, and it just, confidence drains a bit, and it becomes harder for them to sort of snap out of the mistakes that are happening at the moment.
I noticed he said as well that they're not going to change the way they play, though, and he still has that belief. So we'll see if things turn around for Clach. Keith 0, Brora Rangers 1. Paul Brindle's goal, the difference in this one, that came early in the second half. Sounded like Keith goalie Craig Reid after last week's Highland League Weekly had another blinder on Saturday, though. Several strong saves going by the match report. I mean, it's one of those games, isn't it? Brora have come all the way down to Keith. It's job done for them. They've got their 3 points. But if you're Craig Ewan, the Keith manager, you're probably like, well, 1-0 loss to Brora isn't the worst result in the world. Shows how competitive we are.
I think, going by what Craig said, he was a bit disappointed with the first half and acknowledged that but for Craig Reid and some last-ditch defending, probably could have been 2 or 3 down at half time. I think he was happier actually with the second half and how they competed. I mean, the good news for Keith and Craig Reid keeps on coming, and that he's also signed a contract extension. But Brora, probably Ali McDonald's only gripe potentially, again, not scoring more goals, but they've got the job done, and that's what it's about. And Paul Brindle's somebody that, since he's come back to the Cartix in the summer, has started really well, scoring goals and looking a real threat, as you would expect. So, you know, overall, I think if you're Brora, 3 points, you're quite happy.
The last of the teams I consider title challengers at this juncture, of course. Brecon City 5, Strathspey Thistle 0. City were 4-0 up at half time in this one. 3 goals from Spencer Moreland, Fraser McLeod, and a couple from Grady McGrath, the second one being a pen. McGrath completed his hat-trick early in the second half. I was surprised that no league clubs took a punt on Grady McGrath in the summer.
It would have cost him, I think.
Well, that's the thing. I think there might have been 2 or 3 would have done, but clearly he wasn't. Brecon obviously weren't going to, and right, understandably, weren't going to let him move on the cheap.
A Highland League club, any player is for sale at the right price, but clearly Brecon have a high estimation, or should I say valuation of their prized asset, and quite rightly so. As you've seen, he's the main man for them.
I mean, we said last week, touched upon the sort of machine-like Brecon at the moment. They're just rattling off the wins when they play Strathspey. It's not really a game that will define their season. They had done well against big teams prior to Saturday. I mean, so there's no shame in losing 5-0 to Breedon anyway, but they were also missing a heap of players,
Well,
weren't they?
With Breedon, first of all, I think the thing that, from their point of view, would please you is teams, particularly teams like Strathspey, who are maybe more down towards the bottom, go to Glebe Park and look to frustrate and keep the game tight and ideally 0-0 as long as you can. They got an early goal, I think it was 9 minutes, the first goal, and then obviously kicked on for there in the first half. And I always think Breedon, from what I've seen of them, not just this season, but they've been good at getting that early goal, which forces the opposition to change slightly, and then they, so when they're on it, Breedon, they can pick you off, and that's what they've done. But I mean, Strathspey, in defence of them on Saturday, they're without James McShane, Ross Logan, Ian Ross, Daniel Whitehorn, Liam Grant, Callum Blidgertwood, Taylor Sutherland, Jude Fraser. It's 8 players. They did take a couple come back, and they managed to sign Kane Davis, bring him back to the club from Forres on Friday, and he played. But you know, missing those players, particularly the likes of McShane. I mean, no, not knocking anybody else, but particularly like James McShane, Ross Logan, Ian Ross, and probably Daniel Whitehorn as well. They're all guys that would start, they've been regulars and look good for Strathspey. So, you know, any team, if you take big players out, any team, it's going to have an impact, particularly for Strathspey.
Nairn County 4, Inverurie Locos 0. Nairn are flying now, aren't they? 5 wins from 5, 22 goals in 6. That's coming from one like their assistant manager. So apologies if those stats are wrong, but I trust him. Connor Gethin's penalty rebound for the opener after Glenn Donald had handled in the box for Locos. Gethin scored from another pen for handball. Paul Coots got a second yellow for that one, so Locos were down to 10 men. That was after the break. Angus Day and Andrew McLeod, who is on a fair tear at the moment, completed the scoring. But yeah, as I said, Nairn, it's all kind of, for a team we were kind of like a bit, you know, no, I wouldn't say worried about, but they obviously had a slower start than we expected. Now they're on
I was
fire.
joking with Callum before we started filming. Like, it's almost like someone's found an on switch at Nairn County, because they're flying. They're absolutely flying. I don't know what it is. It's just the goals are now flowing freely. The confidence is sweeping through the side. I'm sure Stephen Mackay will be going, see, this is what happens when the player boss comes out of retirement again and kicks everything into life again. But yeah, they're absolutely flying.
I mean, you look now and they've got guys scoring goals as well. Gethin's has got 6 in all competitions. Andrew McLeod's 7, and I think it's 7 in 6 games that he's scored. So that just shows you the sort of the change in things and that. But I mean, the game Saturday, I think the second penalty and Paul Coots' second yellow and then red card is a defining moment in it, because midway through the second half at 1-0, Inverurie are still very much in the game, and then 2-0, man down. It's as good as game over, basically. It's an interesting one because I think Inverurie felt and Paul Coots felt that he'd been sort of nudged as he went to head the ball, and he does handle it, and I mean, your arms sort of go up when you're going for the header anyway, but he ended up handling it and sort of falling, and I'm not sure, it's from the footage I've seen, it's hard to say for definite, and I'm not sure on the referee's view, but I can understand where they're coming from, and it does look like he maybe has been nudged, so I can understand why they are maybe a bit frustrated with that. But by the same token, if you're Nairn, you'll probably have a different view, and you're delighted to take the penalty. And Connor Gethin's made no mistake after maybe getting a wee bit fortunate with the first one where it hit Zach Ellis and came straight back out for him to head it in. But job done. They all count.
Devonvale 0, Huntly 6. Huntly now 3rd in the table. Maybe are Huntly a title?
I was away to say.
Huntly a title contender. Lewis Crosby, I was looking on Saturday at the scores as they went in. I was like, oh, Andy Hunter, is that a first half hat trick? But it wasn't. The third Andy Hunter goal was after the break. Ryan Sewell and Angus Grant scored in the second half as well. Huntly's Cameron Heslop and Vale's Michael Watson were red carded for getting involved in an incident with 8 minutes left, according to our match report. So I don't know if you could shed any further light on that, Callum. But Huntly are looking like a real attacking force, aren't they? And they're not conceding.
Well, we've seen them look like a real attacking force for much of this season, really, other than the game against Buckie that they lost where they drew a blank. But I think, I mean, I'll come back to their goal scoring, but I think what will perhaps please them most about Saturdays is if it's the first clean sheet they've kept this season, because there maybe was an element of, what would you say, perhaps the entertainers about them in terms of like
Holloway's Blackpool.
I mean, I mean, even like the Inverurie game where we had them as the highlights, they played really well in that, but they were sort of the last couple of minutes clinging on a wee bit to the 3-2 when it should have been more comfortable. So I think in last week against Turriff, 3-0 up early doors, back to 3-2, eventually winning 4-2. So I think the clean sheet and for 3-0 up can sort of control in the second half.
That's the secret, Callum. You get your noses in front and you just keep scoring more goals so the other team can't get back into it.
I mean, they're going back to their forwards. Andy Hunter, I mean, he scored a couple against Inverurie, but he's done a lot of good work in that forward line this season without maybe having the goals reward for other players have been scoring. So I think for him to get a hat-trick on Saturday, it's probably, been coming a wee bit, and clearly he's still, as everyone knows, still a player that's very capable of that on his day. Andy, from a Devon Vale perspective, they still unfortunately seem to have this where they can have a day where they're just not quite at it, and they fall behind, and sort of then it's a long way back for them, and that was one of those days again on Saturday.
Right, final result to discuss from the weekend. Turriff are now 6th following their 2-0 win over Forest Mechanics at home. That was despite having Max Foster sent off for a last man challenge after just 5 minutes. Andy Watt header and a Callum Gray free kick after the interval made a difference for Turriff. It sounded like it was good discipline from Turriff in this game. It kind of keep it tight.
Apart from getting somebody sent off.
Yeah, but I mean tactical discipline.
Aye.
To keep it tight and then make their speed on the break count. But that's what I took from Dean Donaldson's comments anyway.
No, I'll give you that. I won't argue with that. But I think that, as Dean said, with the forward players they can be a threat on the break. But I mean, if you're for a very good win for Turriff, clearly, and they're sort of on a bit of a roll at the moment. I mean, they've 5 wins out of 8 for where they've been, and there's very good progress, definitely. I mean, if they're on a roll, Forest have kind of
stalled.
Hit the skids a wee bit. I mean,
what is it about September in Forest Mechanics?
Well, this is the point I was going to make. They sort of went off the boil last September last season, and seems to be a wee bit the case again. I mean, beaten by Brora in the Highland League Cup 4-0, beaten 5-0 by Nairn in the North of Scotland Cup, and then just when you're probably looking for a turnaround in things, Max Foster sent off in the first 5 minutes, and you think this is a good opportunity, but couldn't quite take it against the 10 men. And I think it's one of them as well. The longer it goes at 0-0, and then when Turriff score, it becomes harder, and there's probably more sort of tension, frustration, whatever it is, sets in because you feel that you should be winning or you should be in front.
All right, well, that's all the results from the weekend. Only thing left to do in terms of Saturday's games is have a look at the Breedon Highland League table as things stand.